I picked up these cheap old computer speakers at Goodwill today, and I wanted to see if I could convert them so that they'll work off of these RC batteries that I'm not using anymore. I guess I'll open them up and see what sort of AC to DC conversion is going on in here and what kind of buck or boost converters are going to be needed to bring these down to whatever voltage these speakers are actually running off of. I'd hope that all the power stuff would be in this one because that's where power cord was going in, but it looks like there's just a transformer in here, and then that's being run off into the other speaker, which makes sense because this one has all the volume control and audio out and everything. So I guess I'll have to open this one up too if I really want to see how it's going from the AC out of this transformer to DC for the rest of it. Alright, so looks like here's all of our audio circuitry in this one. Some heat sinks for our amplifier chips in there and a whole bunch of capacitors. There's our full wave bridge rectifier. So this is most likely where we'll want to check to see what our voltage is going to be. So I couldn't get the speaker out without desoldering things, so for now I'm just going to leave it attached. But it looks like these two yellow wires are the ones coming out of the transformer. And then go to here, which then goes through this bridge rectifier. And then it looks like our outputs are these pins, I believe. But I'll probe around with the multimeter a little bit and see what I can get. I can't see any like a boost or buck converters on here, so it looks like it's just taking what's coming out of the transformer and then rectifying it and probably smoothing it through some of these capacitors first, but I don't see anything that would be resembling any sort of switch mode power supply or anything, so it looks like it's just, it'll be fairly straightforward just to probe around and see what we get for voltages. The first hint we have is this big ground plane going across here. So that's just it's just a trace that was left bare and then was covered in solder to help dissipate heat for large amounts of power flow through it. So that's our ground, and I can tell it's a ground plane and not a power plane because those tabs are attached to this heat sink here, these guys which are on the plane, so most likely these aren't going to be at a positive voltage, so they'll be grounded. And then the next thing we can look for is just where the rectifier ends. So this glass diode here goes to this pin here, which is hooked up to this capacitor, so that's most likely some sort of voltage filtering, so I should be able to use that pin as our positive and that as our negative and figure out what kind of voltages we're getting across this thing. Alright, so I'm just going to have a poke where I think all our power's going. So let's get this thing switched on and then see if we get anything. 12 volts it looks like, which is pretty good, so that means I should be able to just directly run it off the battery. Maybe something in there to prevent it from dropping, but this should be fairly tolerable with different voltages, I would think. So let's give it a shot. Let's hook it up to the power supply. I'll get it unplugged. Alright, so I've got positive hooked up just to that diode that I was measuring from before, and the negative is just clipped onto the negative lead of this capacitor. Yeah, it's the negative one. So I'll turn on the power supply now, and if that green light comes on, then things are most likely good. Well, there's the green light. I guess I should try playing music from it to see if anything works out. So I'll plug it into my laptop over here.
Hey there, I'm Bill Simmons from HBO and The Ringer. I have some good news. Bill Simmons' podcast is now available on Google Play. Not only is it the most downloaded sports podcast of all time, not only does it feature a rotating cast of well-known athletes, celebrities, media members, culture critics, and buddies of mine.
So it seems like we're only getting 100 to 200 milliamps out of it, milliamps draw, while it's running on different volumes. So some quick math. These are 2700 milliamp hour batteries. If this is running at 200 milliamps, which is what it looked like it was pulling when it was at a moderate volume, then that should give about 9 3/4 hours of battery life. So close to 10, but real world I'll expect something a little bit less. But one thing I forgot to factor in was that the speaker was missing, so the current draw is most likely going to be double whatever it was, or maybe even less, because right now it's just running at 100 milliamps without even doing anything. So the consumption of the speaker is going to be probably another 100 milliamps, so that's looking at 300 milliamps. So that should give us a decreased battery life around 6 hours, which is still reasonable for what I'm hoping to do with this thing. So I guess now I'll try cranking this up to 12.6 volts. So I'm just going to sweep a voltage range here and see at what point it cuts out. We're starting to get some clipping around 7.5, maybe 8 volts. So that's actually kind of disappointing. I was hoping I was going to have to do more work to get this working, but it looks like I'll be able to just wire some battery connections straight up to these pins and then run some wires out of the case and a little XT60 plug or something for one of those lipos, and it should work no problem. Alright, so I've got the wires soldered all in place now. They're going between ground plane on the negative, and this positive here is going into the bridge rectifier, which is then just getting filtered and going through to here. I didn't solder directly to these two pads because it was going to be pretty close to the ground plane, especially with these 16 gauge wires. I didn't want to risk shorting anything out, so I'll strip the end of these now, and then I guess I'll plug them into the battery and see if this thing powers up. Great, so that seems like it's working fine. Guess I'll put it back together and figure out the best way to route these wires. Alright, those seem pretty secure, so I guess I can start slapping everything back in its place now. Well, I didn't account for that. Looks like these wires are hitting the edge. It's usually a good thing to think through beforehand, but I didn't. There we go. So I'll give the cables about that much room, then I'll just throw a zip tie on there across here so you can't pull them out. So, there we go. Just by pulling that tight, it'll keep it locked on here so that if you yank on the cords at all, it won't put any stress on them. That's just a simple way to do strain relief. Fold this back down. Yeah. Alright, so the speaker's back together. We've got our wires coming out the back. I'm just going to attach this XT60 connector to it so that way I can hook up the battery. Probably cut the wires a little bit shorter. If this goes on here, there's still plenty of room for the cord. So probably cut them off around here, get these soldered on, heat shrunk, and go from there. There we go. It looks pretty good. Just nicely sealed up. We'll probably put some glue or something on there just to prevent it from getting pulled in and to keep any water out. But I guess now it's good to test with the battery and see if it works. Looks like something happened to the LED in the front, but I probably just did that while putting it back together. Oh.
Ever. I hope you'll join us in the fight. Go to stjude.org/musicgives to find out how.
Cool. So it looks like it's working off the battery. Let's just get these clipped off. Probably should unplug the battery first, just in case. There we go. Oh, that's a mess. I like the strain relief though, the cord wrapped around it going through. There we go. So everything's pretty much all set on this. I still have to glue these wires in place, but other than that, it's all hooked up. I've got Velcro on here so I can stick on batteries. One thing I like to do with Velcro is when I have something that I'm going to be putting a lot of different things onto, I like to put both sides of the Velcro on there, so that way, like on batteries, I can have some with the rough side and some with the soft side, so I'm not using just all of one type of Velcro when I'm trying to mount different things. So that way, you know, this will mount no problem, and this battery will mount no problem either. Cool. I think that's pretty acceptable. I'll do some longevity tests to see how long these batteries last, how quickly it drains them, and I think that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with these for $5. They're not a bad pair of portable speakers. Made a couple changes to the speakers just to make them a little bit more user-friendly. So on the back now, these ones, there's just these cord wrap areas. So this one's for connecting the two speakers together, and then I just have some Velcro cable tie that I've used to keep everything in place so they don't unwrap when you don't want them to. And then I did the same on this one for the volume cord, so that way it can just be unstrapped, and then that can be moved to whatever length it needs to be, so you don't have to end up having a whole bunch of cord laying around everywhere. I did a test on battery life, and I ran it for about an hour and a half at a medium volume, just something where I could hear it from across the room, you know, something I considered like a normal listening volume, and then charged up the battery afterwards, and it went down from 12.6 volts to 12.3, so that's only minus 0.1 volt per cell. And then when I charged it, the charger told me that it put in 200 milliamp hours when recharging the battery to full capacity, so that would suggest that an hour and a half of playtime only drained 200 milliamp hours out of the battery. So if one of these batteries 2,700 milliamp hours on a full charge, that would be about 13 hours of playtime, which I'm not sure I fully believe, but it seems like I don't have any reason to doubt that it's going to be an unreasonably short battery life. So hopefully these things should be good for about a day or so on a single battery, which would be pretty cool.